Washington plays ball with the governor for now. A new administration plan for 2-year job training. How far will it go? The law's the law, says Mr. Hutchinson, so here's your cannabis commission. But he has lingering concern for commodities of a different sort. Arkansas Week, next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week, and a busy week it was for Governor Asa Hutchinson and his administration. And that's where we'll begin. Jacob Koifman joins us from KUAR, Public Radio in Central Arkansas, and Hoyt Purvis, columnist for the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Guys, thanks for coming in. Jacob, we'll start with health care because I think the odds seem to favor it all along. But anyway, the state, the Hutchinson administration, got the go-ahead for a much desired initiative this past week from Health and Human Services.
I think you're right. I think it was kind of expected. If we can rewind our clocks a little bit, the state legislature for years now is debating this thing called Medicaid Expansion. It's part of the Affordable Care Act, gives health insurance to about 300,000 low-income people, totally subsidized by the government at this point. And instead of going with federal Medicaid, the federal Medicaid insurance program, the state of Arkansas chose to buy private insurance for all these people. Because we have this sort of modification of Medicaid expansion, anytime we change it, we have to go to federal officials in Washington, D.C. to get the go-ahead from them to make sure that these changes still meet the coverage qualifications of Medicaid, that everybody's
it's their
entitled
money,
to.
you know.
Right, it's their money, so they want some strings attached to it. Something I think, if it was Arkansas's money, we would understand a little bit more. But some of the main changes in the bill that was passed earlier in the year, they were all made kind of with the idea in mind of what the federal government will and won't allow. Since this program's existed for a while now, they have a better idea of what federal officials will allow and not. Some of the things that were approved were very small premiums for some of the richest low-income people on this program, about 2%. There's another working requirement where they don't really require it to work to be on the program, but you have to be referred to a job training program if you get the insurance plan. Kind of small changes in a lot of ways, but they were significant to the Hutch administration, enough to kind of present a ideologically different sell to the legislature, who's kind of reluctant to pass this. But the big picture here is Donald Trump and a new administration will be in effect in January. They might have different ideas about what Medicaid really does and does not allow, or they could gut the program altogether.
Before we go there, a lot, again, it was expected, but a lot was hanging on this approval, like the entire general revenue budget Mr. Hutchinson won.
Yeah, if these changes weren't approved, then the private option, as it was known, now Arkansas Works, would have effectively ended at the end of the year, blasting the Stevens Group, these consultants the legislature hired. They would say it would blast a $700 million hole in the budget over the course of several years. So a lot riding on it, but I think a lot of ways it was an expected outcome. They knew going in that a lot of these things they're asking for were going to get approved. The governor and a lot of conservatives had wanted to make a workforce requirement, where if you didn't have a job, you couldn't get the program. That was something that was too far for the federal government, so Arkansas never really asked for it in a legislative form.
Yeah.
Well, what we have is where there are many in Arkansas politics and government who are very much opposed to the overall concept. But as Jacob indicated, there really wasn't a whole lot of choice here. I mean, Arkansas had to somehow come up with funds or else we were going to be in really a big hole. It was pretty much a foregone conclusion that the governor got the green light. Now, of course, he's got to get the green light through the legislature, and that probably will happen, but not without a lot of turmoil, I suspect. But it's also interesting. You mentioned, of course, in January this becomes Arkansas Works. It also becomes a new administration in Washington, and I don't think anybody really has a clear idea of where we're headed. I mean, what's perhaps ironic about all this is that we're still dealing with Obamacare. And despite all the terrible things said about Obamacare in these last years, that's still kind of the starting point. And where it's going to lead, and the idea of repeal and replace, which has been the sort of mantra, particularly among Republicans, it's not going to be as easily done, I think, as might be suggested by that sort of easy catchphrase about repeal and replace.
And the replacement might be more similar to the Affordable Care Act than a lot of people ever envisioned. This isn't coming so much from Arkansas's congressional delegation, but the governor has said that if Congress repeals this and replaces it, as Governor Hutchinson wants, one of the provisions he wants kept is he wants the federal government to keep paying a large share of the insurance for these 300,000 new people. So fundamentally, our Republican governor has accepted the premise of expanding eligibility, guaranteed insurance for low-income people.
Right.
Well, that was I suspect, the overriding concern of the Obama administration from the start. Well, one, just extending health care, getting basic health care, two, expanding the insurance pool, getting more people to participate in the pool. And in the end analysis, really didn't care how the states did it, as long as they did it.
That's right. And again, we're at the point now where Obamacare has been around long enough that it's sort of become entrenched in certain respects. And making wholesale changes is not, I don't think, something that's going to happen easily overnight.
300,000 Arkansans.
In Arkansas,
now.
more than 300,000 in Arkansas. And I mean, in many respects, Arkansas is sort of the leader, you might say, in terms of coming up with a hybrid plan that has gotten the satisfaction of the feds, as well as at least the administration of the governor in Arkansas.
This too, you're seeing it in Arkansas and on a national level too, from the hospital lobby, as it were. Grave concern about what's going to happen in January and in subsequent months under the Trump administration, because Obamacare is keeping them alive or open.
That's one of the arguments that Republicans have been making to other Republicans in the state legislature, is that if we end this program and don't provide insurance for all of these low-income people, it doesn't mean the state doesn't pay anything. Their argument is that if we don't do this, then we'll be paying for uncompensated care when people visit emergency rooms and through other various supports to local hospitals. And so their argument is it's better to do this, to have people have insurance, to perhaps even go to the doctor regularly in the future if they become used to having insurance, as opposed to just showing up when there's a catastrophic emergency, which somebody has to pay for anyway, because we're not going to tell someone they can't go to a hospital with an injury.
Now, block grants. That is what a great many in the new Congress are going to want, and in fact, a great many Republican governors want is block grant. Block grants from D.C.
I think that term is as amorphous as it sounds to many people. What is in this block grant? Well, will it be up to every state entirely on their own? As you mentioned earlier, though, these are federal dollars, and there's a reason why Congress has certain conditions and strings on it. They want to see that states are good stewards of federal money. Each state says, yes, we can spend federal dollars better than the federal government. The Hutchinson administration all along has said he would prefer a block grant, even when he urged this current program to pass. But in Congress, there's a little bit of a disconnect, because Hutchinson wants the block grant to include funding for Medicaid expansion and to generally keep the principle of letting people who earn this amount of income keep their insurance. But most of our congressional delegation and others, Paul Ryan, for instance, their idea of a block grant is just the traditional Medicaid program, but they would not include the expanded Medicaid population, leaving tens of millions of people without insurance. So what is the block grant going to look like? It's an open-ended question, I think.
And Hoyt, the stage is set. You mentioned Speaker Ryan. There is division within his own caucus going into January over exactly what should be done over health care policy.
There is division, and
forget the Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
He's got to herd cats on his own side.
Yeah, and block grants. That's one likely avenue that we might see things go. But you back away from that, and you see that Arkansas still, one way or another, is going to have some major obligations that are major challenges, and trying to make sure that funding's available for whatever finally emerges.
And this as well, a new initiative from the Hutchinson administration this past week on basically job training.
Right. There's been a whole bunch of education-related bills, if this is what you're referring to. There's one related specifically to job training that would provide all tuition and fees paid for high school graduates, non-traditional students, homeschool students, the government wanted to emphasize, who agree to go to a technical or a community college, and that they have to finish it and actually get their certification, whether it be welding or computer software, any of these in-demand skilled trades that Arkansas seems to be lacking. And the commitment would be these students would have to pass, attain whatever license or certification, and then work in the state for 3 consecutive years in that field. Otherwise, they'd have to repay the free tuition and fees as a loan.
Well, it appears that this is a good concept. Whether exactly how it can work and whether it really will meet the purposes, it's hard to say at this point. But trying to tailor some basic education to high demand areas in the state, ranging from computer science to whatever, welding I think is another one mentioned. This is what's called the ArFuture or ArFuture, and is an effort, I think, by the Hutchinson administration to come up with a plan that might really have an impact on both providing education for people who are going to be in the job market, but also tailoring it to provide people who can fill the positions that would be available in these high demand areas. So at least on paper, it's an interesting idea. We'll see how it works.
And the governor's been promoting this type of development for a long time in various other programs. Last session, his computer science coding initiative in high schools was a big thing. So this is one more step in that, and he puts it all in the frame of, if we want to bring industry here, they have to have qualified workers. So that's one shortage he's trying to address. It's kind of interesting, though. It's an ideological diversion for many conservatives to say that there can be free college. Yeah. It's a little bit different because there's conditions. You must get a job afterward. It's a traditional blue-collar type of jobs. It's not like you're going to art school.
Well, situational politics usually works that way. I did note, too, that in announcing, the press release anyway, in announcing the ArFutures program, the administration placed, or Mr. Hutchinson's press secretary placed in italics for emphasis, no new general revenues involved in this program.
Yeah, they're shifting about a little over $8 million from 2 other college-related grant programs that they argue aren't as effective as this program will be. Well, I guess we'll see in 3 or 4 years what the return on that is, but one of them was the WIG grant, and one was the GO grant.
Okay, another new program which didn't have Mr. Hutchinson's backing. We now have a marijuana commission. The governor, the speaker, the pro tem announced their choices for the medical marijuana commission, or whatever we're going to call it.
Yeah, there's 5 members on this commission that were appointed. David Couch, who is the architect of the Arkansas Medical Marijuana Amendment, the constitutional amendment approved by voters in November. He said he thought there'd be more business people on there since they're in the business. The point of this commission is to help get the process going for distributing licenses to dispensaries where you'll get the medical marijuana, and cultivation centers where the state will allow people to grow it legally. But he seems generally satisfied with the picks. He thinks the governor and the commission will faithfully try to enact the law, although all of them appear to be politically opposed to this. 4 of them said they voted against the amendment. 1 I think we never got an answer from. So the commission, they're supposed to meet within 10 days or so. They have a June deadline that looks like it might actually be July to get all these this licensing process going.
Would appear to be a great potential for contentiousness in this thing. Who gets the licenses, what, how, what's the criteria?
We're in uncharted territory here, at least in terms of Arkansas, but even there I think we don't have many exactly comparable situations. I don't think anybody really knows. I mean, we are at the implementation stage, but how exactly what that means is not at all clear, I think. And actually, I would say these people have this commission. The members have a real challenge ahead of them because the governor has committed himself to seeing that this thing is implemented, even though he was opposed to it. It's, I think, going to present some real challenges, given the short-term time frame that's been set up for this.
And there are some constitutional obligations for this commission. Arkansas must legally provide an adequate supply of this drug for patients. And so to do that, they have to license these cultivation centers and dispensaries. Otherwise, they'll be failing their constitutionally mandated goal for this. But they're supposed to have a minimum of 4 cultivation centers and 20 dispensaries, and there's a range above that. So they have to at least get that amount in to have fulfilled their job. And one state legislator, at least one, has suggested perhaps we should pay the commissioners $30,000 a year to try to make sure they can get all this work done in such a short time frame. But the amendment only called for them to get $85 a day when they meet.
We'll continue to follow. Now, it's flora of a different sort that we're talking about that's of concern to the administration, and that's rice, cotton, corn, wheat, and fauna as well, protein, pork. The governor had a conversation with President-elect Trump Hoyt some days ago and proclaimed himself reassured about the president-elect's position on trade. And yet, in at least 2 speeches in the past subsequent to that conversation, Mr. Trump continues to proclaim loudly his intention to scrap, essentially, both NAFTA and the TP, which was in trouble anyway.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that a lot of different directions we could go with this. But first of all, as you say, President-elect Trump has been outspoken in his determination to do away with NAFTA, to do away with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and really to sort of create a new script for international trade. Within that context, then, we have, according to Governor Hutchinson, and no reason to doubt the accuracy of what he says that he discussed with the president-elect, and that is that Arkansas, for example, has a major stake in global trade. And particularly this relates to the agricultural areas that Arkansas exports are very, very important to the economy of this state. So Arkansas very much has a stake in this, and it's going to be, and we also have the situation where a lot of the Republicans in Congress, particularly in the House, don't quite go along with Mr. Trump on this. And suggestions that maybe he'll find a way to step back a little bit from a really sort of broad, sweeping policy that would do away with basically any trade agreement. So a lot of unanswered questions there. One of the specific issues that comes up is the issue of Cuba, where Governor Hutchinson has said we should seize the moment, that is, after the death of Fidel Castro. And there's been so much effort among Arkansas members of Congress to try to open the way for Arkansas agricultural commodities to be sold to Cuba. It hasn't really happened on any kind of significant level yet, and obviously there are still complications there. And you get some interesting aspects. Of course, Senator Cotton has generally not gone along with the other members of the Arkansas delegation in terms of Cuba. Now we have at least a rumor or a mini rumor that Congressman Crawford from East Arkansas is being considered as Secretary of Agriculture in the Trump administration. That seems like a little bit unlikely, but then not out of the question altogether. Crawford, not surprisingly, has been a strong advocate of selling U.S. rice, Arkansas rice, to Cuba. So lots of questions that remain to be answered here, and but they potentially are very, very important to the state of Arkansas.
Well, it probably ought to be said that Secretary Clinton voiced opposition. But initially, she called it, I think, the gold standard. We're talking about the TPP, and
right.
It was widely assumed that had she been elected, she would have backtracked on her backtrack.
Yeah,
recognizing how important that treaty
and
could
there are many people who have in politics and in Congress who have been longtime supporters of these kinds of trade agreements, who now find themselves in a very awkward position of having gone along with Trump, and they would have gone along, I guess, with Clinton had she been elected and stuck to that policy. But I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see some kind of sidestepping here that might enable things not to be quite on such a sweeping scale as the president-elect has been advocating throughout his campaign.
And this yet another issue involving Washington. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Senator Cotton, has apparently teamed with the gentleman from South Carolina, Representative Gowdy, to take well, they would call it maybe a fresh look at things, although it's not really that fresh. The issue certainly isn't new.
Yeah, this is interesting in many respects. Yes, Gowdy, the Republican congressman from South Carolina who chaired the special Benghazi committee in the House and got a lot of attention for that. But Senator Clinton and Congressman Gowdy have been talking about the need for Congress to reassert itself, to play more of a role, particularly in regard to foreign policy. And, you know, this is interesting, as I say, in many, many respects to look at this. Certainly, Senator Cotton has been very critical of President Obama for his use of executive orders, executive power, and sort of going around Congress. Now, with a Republican president coming in, you have these two Republicans saying we want Congress to be more in the ballgame, that we want a real balance of power in Washington. I can't help but note that there is some historical irony here, is because who does that sound like most of all? J. William Fulbright. Certainly there are many, many strong differences between Fulbright and Cotton, but on this there is at least the similarity that they're both, Fulbright certainly, that was the main, particularly in his latter years in Congress, he pushed very hard for a congressional reassertion of power, and that appears to be what Senator Cotton is talking here, and emphasizing that, well, it's a president of his own party, but of course that was also the case with Fulbright during much of his time when President Johnson was very much in the same party and a former political ally. So where this may go, we don't know yet, but I think it indicates that Mr. Cotton is not necessarily prepared to go along with Trump when it comes to foreign policy and national security policy.
You mentioned the late Mr. Fulbright's concern over the ceding of congressional prerogatives, certainly in matters of war and peace or foreign policy. In truth, a great many Democrats, although they may have during the Obama years, they may have enjoyed or approved of the outcome, but the end, they didn't necessarily, they very quietly disapproved of the means.
Well, yeah, and so what we find now is that we're coming to the end of the Obama administration, and with Trump sort of taking or leaving the impression that he's just going to sort of wave his magic wand and make these things happen. And I think what is going to be particularly interesting is to see how Republicans in Congress respond to that.
All right. We had one other kind of national note, although he had a little bit very tenuous Arkansas ties. He was here a couple of 3 times. The late Mr. Glenn of Ohio, John Glenn, I guess it's fair to say, what a genuine American hero, and you got to spend some time with him in your Washington
days.
Right.
We have a road named in his honor.
In
Little Rock. Yeah. During the time I worked as a Senate staff member, I got to know John Glenn just a little bit, and he was such an impressive guy. And I recall this one time when I was at a meeting in the majority leader's office, and senators were going and coming, and at some point there was just Senator Glenn and myself, and it sort of dawned on me, this is a guy, when I was editor of my college newspaper, I wrote an editorial about a great American hero, and he was a very low-key guy. He did make one futile effort to become a presidential candidate. That didn't go very far, but he was someone who, not surprisingly, enjoyed great respect among those, particularly those in the Senate, who served with him.
We're out of time, so we'll end it there. Jacob Hoyt, thanks for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.